Score big with Xfinity Internet. Supercharge your home with incredibly fast and powerful supersonic Wi-Fi. With 3 times more bandwidth, it covers the field and then some. That's unbeatable internet from Xfinity.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into another edition of Inquirer Live at GameDay Central, presented by Xfinity. Today, we are coming to you from beautiful Indianapolis. We are here inside the press box at Lucas Oil Stadium, where in just a very little bit, down on the field, the Philadelphia Eagles will take on the Indianapolis Colts. I am Eagles beat reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer, Josh Tolentino, and as always, I am joined by my co-host and fellow beat reporter of GameDay Central, EJ Smith. EJ, how is it going? Are you staying warm over there?
I was about to say, beautiful is a strong word. I mean, listen, it's nice here. It definitely is nice. It's a nice stadium. But yeah, I had a very short walk outside today, and it was good. It kind of got the juices flowing, kind of wakes you up a little bit. It's like getting in a cold tub. So yeah, I'm doing well. I'm ready to go for the show.
Despite Colts owner Jim Irsay saying that the roof would be open, thankfully, EJ, the roof here is closed. Again, we are coming to you from Lucas Oil Stadium. Outside temperatures are in the high teens, the wind chill, so definitely chilly, like what EJ mentioned. But again, no elements today here in Indianapolis. I want to remind everyone throughout the season that we will be coming to you live before every game and that you can also continue the conversation with us. EJ, where is the best place that they could find us?
Yeah, Josh, they can find us at Inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. Once again, that's Inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. That's where we like to have a two-way conversation with you guys. We put our analysis in there in the chat, and we want you guys to kind of, tell us what you're seeing, tell us what you're thinking about the game. And, like I said, it can become a conversation. And then, we take some of your comments every week for a segment later on in the show. It's one of our favorite segments called What You Said, so you have a chance to be featured on the show, or you just get to chop it up with us in there.
Certainly, EJ, that's the place to be. Again, that's Inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day, where you can continue the conversation with us. We will go through some comments and questions later in the show. Make sure you tap in on that link. EJ, let's jump right into it. What is the latest with this team? This is kind of some unfamiliar territory for these Eagles. The team is coming off their first loss of the season this past Monday. It's a short week for them, but this past Monday, EJ, they experienced their first loss to the Washington Commanders. During that game, it seemed sort of like the perfect storm for defeat in regards to everything that happened with the turnovers, with the lack of time of possession. Really with just all the miscues. EJ, how do you expect this Eagles team to bounce back?
Yeah, I think that, you wrote about this in your prediction column, and, we've written a lot about it. The tone in the locker room after that loss was kind of surprising. Those guys definitely didn't seem like they really skipped a beat. I think they saw it for what it was. They turned the ball over 4 times, actually, if you count that garbage time one. Turned the ball over a bunch, didn't really stop the run. They really just had, a confluence of missed calls and a couple, mental mistakes and, some costly penalties. So, I think that they kind of looked at it like, everything had to go wrong for us to lose this game. I think that they still view themselves as a good team, and I don't think it's like I don't think that they were really panicking, which I think is the right response. I mean, obviously the Eagles started the season at 8-0, but teams have bad games. You look across the league every single week, and, it's not like the team that's favored always ends up winning. So I expect them to kind of keep on the same pace that they've been on. I picked them to win, as we'll talk about later in the show. So, yeah, I definitely don't think that this is going to become, a spiraling effect or anything like that.
Certainly, it's interesting to see how they'll respond. They haven't dealt with this type of adversity, specifically coming off a loss. But it's been a busy week. We mentioned it was a short week. EJ, busy couple days back in Philadelphia with the Eagles boosting their defensive line, specifically at the interior with the additions of Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph, 2 veteran defensive tackles. EJ, I believe Suh is 35, Joseph is 34. Can they still produce here with these Eagles at a high level, or at least what the team would like to see on the field from both of them?
Yeah, you mentioned it was a busy week. I always remember our former colleague Les Bowen talking about how every time he walked his dog, it felt like the Eagles would break news. That was me in my car this week. Every time I got in my car, it felt like they did something that necessitated me getting to wherever I was going much quicker than I was anticipating. But yeah, I do. I think that these two guys are, guys who have proven that they can make an impact in the league. We haven't seen either of them this season, and I think that there are some valid questions about how much they have left in the tank and what they'll be able to contribute after starting the season as free agents. But that said, both of these guys are used to playing a lot of snaps. The Eagles have typically tried to find defensive linemen, edge rushers who are used to playing big roles and kind of put them in a limited role. It's the Robert Quinn model. Chris Long, Michael Bennett. They put these guys who are used to being starters. They put them in that 30%, 40% of the snaps, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, their production, they become more efficient, they become more productive because you're limiting a little bit of what they have to do. They're fresh all the time, and I do think that that's what they probably envision with these two guys. I view Linval Joseph as kind of like the Jordan Davis gap, which is funny because that's what they're hoping he will do is stop a few gaps, plug a few gaps there. And I feel like Ndamukong Suh is kind of probably going to take a lot of those Milton Williams snaps and be the third or fourth guy in the defensive tackle rotation, not at nose tackle, but at three technique or 4-eye or even five tech. Suh could play all over the line. He's a versatile guy, and he was productive last season. So that's kind of how I feel those guys will fit in. I don't know how that'll look today. They obviously both just got here. They don't really know the terminology or the scheme super well yet, I would imagine. But yeah, I do think that long term, you'll probably see Joseph more while Davis is out. And you'll see Suh probably in the rotation for the rest of the year.
I mentioned this in our thumbs up, thumbs down exercise with our colleague Jeff in the story that published yesterday that you can find at Inquirer.com. They've got to learn new terminology. When we spoke to Suh, he kind of seemed like everything was a whirlwind there on Friday for him. He said he was going to dive into the playbook, but as an interior defensive tackle, I'd argue that that's one of the more easier, smoother positions that you can transition into a new defense. Really, you just plant your hand in the ground, and it's going to be more complicated than this. But really, you have one goal in mind, which is to really wreak havoc in the backfield, get over your blocker. We will see the snap count distribution between Suh and Joseph later today. But again, both are active today in their first game with their new team, with these Philadelphia Eagles. EJ, we mentioned Suh, we mentioned Joseph. That kind of consumed the news week throughout the entire week. But this is a emotional game for Coach Nick Sirianni. He makes his return to Indianapolis along with a few others, wide receiver Zach Pascal, running backs coach Jamal Singleton, defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon, Kevin Petullo. All these faces making the return to Indy, but obviously a lot of attention here with Nick Sirianni making his return.
Yeah, a little Game Day Central exclusive nugget. I saw Jonathan Gannon at the hotel gym this morning, and I asked him, like, is it good to be back? And he kind of went, it's a little gloomy here right now. So yeah, I guess our colleagues got a kick out of that one. So yeah, I do. I think that this will be, a little more special for those guys. Obviously, Nick Sirianni had a good relationship with Frank Reich, who was recently fired here. So yeah, I do think that there might be a little bit extra emotion. They might not acknowledge it, but I do think that there's probably a little bit of a extra emotion for this one.
Yeah, and we just saw moments ago former Eagles safety, a Super Bowl champion Rodney McLeod, also on the field, saying hi to former faces, former teammates. Marcus Epps was one of them. Wrote about that earlier in the week on McLeod's impact on this organization. So, again, just a meaningful game for many with all those emotions attached, reunions of sorts. EJ, let's transition over to who's hurt and who's healthy. It is a significant week for these Eagles. We mentioned the additions of Joseph, of Suh. Let's talk why they're here. They need depth there at defensive tackle, and the Eagles made 2 moves to IR this week by the way of tight end Dallas Goedert. He's got a shoulder injury that he sustained during Monday's game, and defensive tackle Marlon Tuipulotu has a knee injury. Both players were moved to injured reserve. How do you think that specifically impacts the team? Obviously, a huge loss there with Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, I think the Dallas Goedert one is definitely the more significant of the two. Marlon, is obviously playing well, but they kind of have found a solution for his snaps with Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph. But I mean, you really can't understate how big Dallas Goedert is for the Eagles offense, not just as a pass catcher, someone who's productive in the pass game, whether it's screens right after the catch or, stretching the field, stretching down the field. He's a big part of their passing game, but I would argue he's even a bigger part and sort of the framework of the offense, just their ability to run out of light personnel packages because he's such a good blocker, their ability to throw out of heavy personnel packages because he's such a good receiver. That's the type of thing that makes this offense unpredictable. It's what makes this offense hard to scheme against for, opposing teams. And you lose that with Dallas Goedert out. We could talk about their possible replacements for him. But if you look at Jack Stoll, he's a willing blocker, he's a good blocker, but he's not as much of a threat in the pass game. You look at Grant Calcaterra, he's a little inexperienced as a blocker, better receiver. Now, if they have to start putting Grant Calcaterra in when they want to pass and put Jack Stoll in when they want to run, then they become predictable. It's going to be a lot harder for them to stay multiple out of those looks. So I think that if you're looking at some of the most important people on the Eagles offense, obviously Jalen Hurts is kind of at the center of everything, but I would argue that Dallas Goedert is probably very close number two as far as the people who make that offense work. So I don't think you can understate how big the loss is, and I'm really curious to see how they're going to try to insulate his absence.
It's pretty absurd the amount of attention that goes to Dallas Goedert, the emphasis that they have on him. Especially, we saw a more of an emphasis thrown to Dallas Goedert on third down situations, plays when scenarios where they really know they need a play. He was their money man, and he worked a lot in the screen game. He was a good blocker. EJ, he led the all NFL tight ends in yards after catch. That's just, you're not going to replace that overnight. It's going to take a group effort. You mentioned all the possibilities. One that I want to throw in there, more targets for Devontae Smith, more targets for A.J. Brown in the passing game, but they might lean a little bit more on the run game. This team is a passing offense, but last year we saw that kind of when their backs up against the wall, when they were at that 2-5 mark, really for the rest of the year, they turned to the run game. I'm not saying that they're going to transition to a run heavy offense. They've got these guys in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and there's a reason they're here. But with Dallas Goedert out, they've got to mix it up. Again, it's going to be impossible to have a direct solution to replacing him. But again, a huge loss there with Dallas Goedert. We will see how this team adjusts. EJ, other notes regarding the injury status of the team, besides Dallas Goedert, besides Marlon Tuipulotu, everyone on the Eagles 53-man roster is healthy heading into this game. The only player who will not be playing is Josh Jobe, who was dealing with a hamstring injury, the reserve cornerback there for the Eagles.
Yeah, no surprises, no surprise injuries. Obviously there's some significant guys on IR at this point, but yeah, I mean, generally, I think the active roster is pretty healthy, and yeah, this team still has a lot of talent. When I was looking at the prediction, it's a little, obviously, I think as I said, it's a little worrying that they'll be without Dallas Goedert, but they are generally healthy, and they definitely have a talent advantage today. Sorry.
No, you're all good. And then again, Tyree Jackson elevated. It looks like he's active. And Marlon Tuipulotu, Dallas Goedert, 2 injured reserve. We will see exactly how those absences affect the Eagles today. EJ, let's transition over to what you said. Again, a reminder to everyone viewing back home, you can continue the conversation with us over there at Inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. During next week's show, we will be back in Philadelphia for Sunday Night Football against the Green Bay Packers. We'll have a chance to read your comments there in this section called What You Said. EJ, our first comment comes from Joseph Bost, who says, "Sure, the Eagles made mistakes, but I am sorry. Gannon's defensive scheme is offensive to me. No pressure means opportunities for even the most inept teams." EJ, you can go back and forth on this one. Jonathan Gannon's scheme is what it is. The defense is going to limit the big plays. They're going to give up, what they seem as acceptable in giving up. One thing that specific department that I would like to see some improvement on are these in-game adjustments from Gannon. We saw what the Washington Commanders did last week. The Eagles only had, I believe, 19 minutes in possession. That's, they've got to get the ball back to the offense. And, they've got all these playmakers on offense that we talked about earlier. you can't really run up the score or have a competitive game when your offense is on the bench. And kind of what Fletcher Cox said earlier in this week, he felt like crap, as a PG way of saying it.
Yeah, no, I think that we've learned by now that Jonathan Gannon is quite a controversial coordinator here, and I think part of it is just what Eagles fans are used to seeing. Aggressive defenses with lots of blitzing, and Jim Schwartz with single high safety with an aggressive defensive line, and this scheme is more passive. There's no way around it. Like there's been a lot of discussion about the run defense. The Eagles are the way they are against the run almost by choice. It's like if they want to shore up against the run, it's going to cost them on the back end, and they're not willing to do that. So, it's going to be light boxes. It's going to be, two high safeties and, only two linebackers on the field with a slot cornerback who maybe can't help as much against the run. And, I think that is frustrating for fans at times, and I understand it, especially when they get gashed like they did against Washington. But I don't really know. I think that this is where the next test for Jonathan Gann. I think we've seen that he's a good coordinator on third and medium, third and long. When he gets into known pass situations, they've been really successful. They've generated a lot of turnovers, generated a lot of pressure. It's really those third and short situations, or getting into those third and longs that I think we've seen some things that are left to be desired with Gannon. I think that, if he's going to be, if he can sort of figure out those 1st and 10, 2nd and 7, how to kind of get them behind the sticks, that's kind of the next step for them. Because, third down defense, a lot of it is circumstantial. Are you in 3rd and 3 or are you in 3rd and 6? Because those are way different situations. So I think that that's kind of what they're trying to figure out now, is how to get into those known pass situations again. I think, the offense helps them a lot because, when there's a big lead, obviously they're in a lot of known pass situations, but getting to them is going to be the next challenge for them.
Our next comment comes from JML225, who says the Eagles offense needs to turn the tables on teams that will try the Washington formula by themselves playing a bit more ball possession. EJ, we kind of discussed this in our last comment, but in addition to the defense playing well, adjusting throughout games, the Eagles offense has to stay on the field. We saw them, you're not going to get a lot of plays when you're only having so few amount of plays in the game. But you got to combat that with running the ball. This is one of the better offensive lines in the league. Miles Sanders is having one of the best stretches of his career. At times, you have to, again, we spoke on the adjustments on defense, lean a bit more on the run, which is kind of what I predicted earlier might happen. But not just that, he speaks on the Washington formula, which is take away time of possession from these Eagles.
Yeah, I think that that's something that bad teams will try against the Eagles is let's run the ball 50 times. Let's try and, shorten the game. Let's possess the ball, try and limit possessions and everything like that. That's typically not a good strategy, that's typically not a way of winning formula to, try and limit possessions. I think that it kind of bears out that being aggressive on 4th down and being aggressive in the red zone is really how you kind of keep up with an offense as productive as the Eagles offense has been. But I do think that's what teams are going to try. Now, I don't think it's going to be effective every single time. Like, Washington tried it, the Steelers tried it, and Houston tried it. The Eagles are 2-1 in those games. So I don't think it's necessarily the most productive way to do it. But the Eagles still have to figure out how to stop this. There are going to be teams that they play, good teams. The Titans are coming up, teams that can really run the ball, and that's what they're going to want to do. And I think that's why they made the moves on the interior defensive line. That's a big part of, as the season progresses, we're going to get more and more tests with this team. We're going to be able to see them against different styles of teams and figuring out how they're going to fare in the playoffs. This is a big part of it. So I don't really want to put a lot of stock into this, bad teams can just run the ball against you and, limit possessions. You're really only going to limit 1 or 2 possessions. And the Eagles were a Quez Watkins, staying down or, one penalty away from winning that game against Washington. I think that's kind of I think that's illustrative. Against these bad teams, the margin for victory is so thin if they're going to try and run the ball 50 times a game. But I do think that what you said about the running, the balance against Washington, that's definitely valid. I mean, they had 2 running back attempts at the half against Washington. I mean, there's probably needs to be a little bit more balance there. But I do think that, again, the margin for error is so thin for teams that are going to try and run the ball 50 times against them that they'll probably win more games than not against teams like that.
EJ, our last comment comes from Ronnie B, who says, I feel sorry for Indy in this one. The Eagles will be angry over losing to an inferior team and letting the possibility of a perfect season slip through their fingers. This is a revenge game. EJ, I don't think the players are really bought up on the perfect season narrative. We saw AJ Brown after the game smiling, joking in a way. That this, almost in a way relieved that the perfect season talk was over. Jason Kelsey kind of held back a little bit. He wishes that the team was 9-0. But discussing this comment specifically on, them being angry over losing to an inferior team, I think Nick Sirianni, to go to his mantra, he wants to go 1-0. Aside from the emotions attached to this game for him making his return to Indianapolis.
Yeah, like, we talked about it earlier. It's kind of just like, I think that they're going to try and stay the course. I think that they're not going to look at that Washington loss as, oh my goodness, we got to play 150% this week. We got to, I don't think they're pressing going into this game. I think that they kind of look at it like, we've won 8 of the last 9 games. We are clearly a talented team that can win football games. And, we don't really have to change the formula. Again, I think that if you just look at the way they lost against Washington, I keep saying it. It's like, it was just kind of like everything kind of broke against them. And, a lot of it was easy for them to control. A lot of them is easy for them to clean up. So, I don't necessarily think that they're pressing going into today, but I do think that, there's always a little bit more urgency when you lose a game. So, yeah.
All right, EJ, let's transition over to predictions. But first, some thoughts from our colleague, Jeff McClain.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff McClain of the Philadelphia Inquirer, here to talk about, obviously, the Eagles game versus the Colts. And this will be an interesting one because it's the first time that the Eagles are coming off a loss. So I think we'll find out a lot about this team and how far they can go by how they respond to what was essentially kind of a perfect storm of everything that could go wrong, went wrong in that loss to Washington last week. Now, the Eagles are coming off a short week, having played on Monday night. They have to travel all the way to Indianapolis. So there's a little bit more involved in terms of the time span and the travel. And it's not like the Colts, who just recently fired Frank Reich, are at their bottom because they won last week with Jeff Saturday, the new head coach. They did so by running effectively on the ground with Jonathan Taylor. So guess what? The Eagles haven't had a good run defense for most of the season, and especially these last 2 weeks without Jordan Davis at nose tackle. So it stands to reason that the Colts won't run the ball. They're gonna attack it, and they're gonna attack them on the ground. Now, the Eagles have gone out and made some changes to address that. First off, getting Linval Joseph to fill in for Jordan Davis at nose tackle. I think he should be able to play right away. And in those 5-down looks, you'll see him at the nose tackle spot doing what he's done for many years. They also went out and got Ndamukong Suh. I'm not sure if Suh will be playing in this game. I guess we'll find out any moment now. But my guess is that Suh probably won't be ready and Joseph will be. Now, with him in there, that allows the Eagles to do what they want to do on defense, which is to keep 5 up front and still allow them to have 5 in the back with split safeties. Jonathan Gannon, obviously, as we all know about his scheme, doesn't want to give up the big play. So he's willing to give up a little bit on the run. But last week, as we saw with Washington, they were willing to keep pounding the ball on 1st and 2nd down. And I think the Colts are going to do that too. It's up to Gannon and this defense to stop them early on so they don't have short 3rd downs. If they can do that, then I think the offense, which we've seen pretty much all this season, perform at a high rate. And aside from last week, because of those 3 turnovers, I'd say all 3 of them were a little bit in the fluky nature, aside from that late turnover that they had on the last play of the game. I think this offense should get back in the rhythm, even without Dallas Goedert. Now, that's obviously a big question. He's been one of the best tight ends in the NFL this season, but they do have other guys they can get the ball to. Certainly, you may see more catches or more targets for A.J. Brown, more targets for Devontae Smith. Quez Watkins, he's been underused. Last week is the most catches he had. There's an opportunity for them to take advantage of Kenny Moore in the slot. And you're going to see probably Jack Stoll at tight end play a little bit more. Grant Calcaterra, maybe the guy may see more targets at tight end. And then you have the running backs, Miles Sanders and Kenny Gainwell, Boston Scott. Those guys haven't caught the ball a lot this season, but I think there's an opportunity to get them involved, specifically with those running back screens. So, look, this Colts team is good. They've had some turmoil this year, obviously having Frank Reich get fired, but there's still a lot of talent on this team. Matt Ryan is still a quarterback who's gotten his former team, the Falcons, to the Super Bowl. He's been to many Pro Bowls. Jonathan Taylor is a top-notch running back. They have good players on defense, specifically up front in the middle of that line. So this is a team that could be dangerous for this Eagles if they're allowing last week's loss to affect them. All that being said, I got to still stick with the Eagles. I think this is a good team. I think they'll be able to respond to this loss, and I have them winning 27-19. Thanks a lot, and back to you guys at Game Day Central.
All right, EJ. Jeff has these Eagles winning. He talked about the hurdles that they might face, specifically there with Jonathan Taylor. EJ, before you give me your game prediction, I want to hear your player to watch out for today on the Eagles.
Oh, that's a good one. Do you want offense or defense?
Give me one on both, and we'll go through all four of them.
Defense, give me Hassan Reddick with a couple sacks. I know I've had Hassan a couple of times this year, but I do think that the defensive line will play well. Probably a little bit of extra juice from the additions, and if the Eagles get out to a lead, they're going to have some obvious pass situations where I think Hassan can make an impact. Give me Zach Pascal as the offensive player to watch. I want to go outside the box. I feel like Pascal will play a little bit more with Goddard out. I mean, if you look at the options, obviously, the tight ends are going to be a big part of filling in for Goddard. But I don't know. I just feel like if you need some toughness when you're at 11 and you want to run the ball and also kind of stay unpredictable, I could see Zach Pascal being that guy, a tough slot receiver who can block. Obviously he's playing Lucas Oil again. Nick's probably going to want to get him a touch or two. So, yeah, give me Zach Pascal as the guy to watch on offense.
Give me the running backs, specifically Miles Sanders, Kenny Gainwell. Could see them thriving in an environment like today, these indoor conditions, like what we mentioned earlier. More targets for Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown with Dallas Goedert out. But I don't know why, but I just have an itch that the Eagles might be running the ball more. On defense, we haven't really talked much about him. It's almost like he's overlooked. We've definitely covered him and wrote about him, but in regards to the show, EJ, safety, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, as he likes to go by. What a great acquisition there for the front office in obtaining a playmaker back there, EJ. And what surprised me the most about him is he hasn't really played safety at all in the NFL. Here he is just thrown back there, and he's playing that center field ball hawk mentality. With Matt Ryan back there, that the Colts are going to be airing it out, not necessarily having the best personnel there on the wide receiver side for the Colts. I think there will be plays having to be made there with C.J. Gardner-Johnson there, the back of the secondary. EJ, what did you put for your prediction in today's edition of the Philadelphia Inquirer?
I think I had 21-10 or 24-10. I would go 21-10. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. Would not surprise me at all if this is kind of like a slow start, kind of in a malaise for both sides. Obviously, Indy's coming off of that, win against the Raiders, but I think the Eagles' defense is just a little bit better than the Raiders right now. The Raiders have some dysfunction going on. So, I could see this being a low-scoring affair. Could definitely see this being a little bit of like it's like the first quarter ends 0-0 or something like that. But, yeah, I do think the Eagles will probably get it going, score enough to get a lead, and then kind of just protect the lead from there. So yeah, I think I had 21 or 24-10.
I think I also had the Eagles winning about by 10 points. Unless again, last week we called it the perfect storm of mistakes, EJ, with the turnovers, with the lack of possession against the Commanders. It's hard seeing the Eagles repeat those same mistakes, not being able to adjust to teams that are going to try that tactic with running the ball at such a heavy rate. So we're both taking the Eagles. Jeff McClain took the Eagles. EJ, anything else to look out for before we wrap up?
Look out for making it back to the hotel without my heart stopping because it's so cold outside. That's about it.
And there you go. And here we are before kickoff again from Lucas Oil Stadium. The roof is still closed, so Jim Irsay was just playing here with fans leading into this game. EJ, let's wrap it up. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to Inquire Live at Game Day Central, presented by Xfinity. Make sure you stick around at Inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day to follow along and continue the conversation there. Myself, EJ, Jeff, Mike Sealski, we are all here on site ready to cover this game between the Eagles and the Colts. Who knows? Our very next game, our next Game Day Central show, back Sunday night in Philadelphia against the Green Bay Packers. We will have a chance to read your comments and questions there on Game Day Central. For EJ Smith, I am Josh Tolentino. Thank you so much for tuning in to Game Day Central. We hope you enjoy the game.